Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Talk Radio. So, today I wanted to discuss our triggers and what it means when we become offended. So, I talk about this in my book that was just released, Don't You Effing Dare. It's available on Amazon if you'd like to check that out. But I have a whole chapter where we dive into this. It's called Our Triggers and Why We Get Offended. So, the ego is often offended by the actions of others. But I found myself asking, why is that? And trying to investigate those triggers and really dive into, okay, why am I feeling this way when somebody else says something? Why am I putting so much weight and importance on what somebody else said, allowing it to affect me? So when I started to dive into shadow work a little bit more, which we've talked about in a few of the most recent episodes, so you can go back and listen to that if you want more information. But the ego typically only becomes offended if they believe something to be true in a statement that was said to us. And I'm going to give you a few examples as we talk about this today. So I'll give you an example of a word that I'm triggered by, the word stupid. So I think a lot of us are triggered by this word because at some point in our life, maybe we were called stupid and it severely hurt our feelings, understandably. So we have a lot of trauma with that word and we push back when we hear it said. But when you really dive into, and we talked about this in the episode entitled Diving into Shadow Work, we hold all traits, right? And no particular word can encapsulate anything. No particular word can describe anything. So instead of thinking of all traits as words, I like to think of all traits as being on a spectrum of light to dark. We hold all of the traits, all of the light traits, kindness, generosity, etc., and all of the dark traits, manipulation, greed, jealousy. We hold them all. So when I was called stupid, I started really diving into that and saying, okay, well, what are the essential aspects of that trait? It's when you act carelessly or lacked reasoning in your decision making, right? And I think that we can all agree that all of us have embodied those things before. We've all acted carelessly and we've all lacked reasoning in our decision making. But a lot of times when we are called a specific word, such as stupid in this example, we're so triggered by the word that we can't get past it in order to see the essential meaning to say, okay, well, I do hold all traits, just like you hold all traits. And the reason, like the person calling you this name, and the reason why that person feels the need to call somebody else that word or that trait is because that trait is within them and they feel shame around that trait. So instead of accepting that and integrating that, they pretend it doesn't exist within them, and instead they point it out in somebody else when they perceive it's being expressed. So are they capable of those traits? Yes. Do we also hold those traits? Yes. Is there trauma around language when we're called specific words like that? Yes. Two things can be true in this conversation. This is such a nuanced conversation and it's hard to discuss, but two things can be true. It's not okay to call somebody names like that stupid because there is trauma around language in our society and we do become very triggered when we hear words like that. But the other truth is we hold all traits. So when you're called something like that and you feel offended, it's because a part of you believes that to be true and you don't want it to be true. And so you become offended, right? So I'll give you another example that might help with this. Let's say somebody walks up to you and they say, you are a horrible skydiving instructor. And you think to yourself, okay, I'm not a skydiving instructor. Let's hope in this example you're not. And so there's no part of you that believes that to be true. So you're not offended by them saying that. It would be like if somebody walked up to you and been like, you're a hamster. You'd be like, okay, you're crazy, and walk away. But if that same person walked up to you and has said, for example, let's say you're a nurse, just take whatever your profession is, and somebody walked up to you and said, you're a bad fill in the blank. In this example, you're a bad nurse. And you are a nurse, it would hurt your feelings because there's a part of you, no matter how small that part is, that believes it to be true. And it would be like if somebody walked up to me and said, you're a bad writer, and I just finished writing my book. I mean, that would that would stab me, that would hurt me, that would hit me in my feels, understandably. So I became offended and triggered because there's a part of myself that believes that to be true. So the next time that you're triggered, I want you to try and dive into, why am I being triggered? You have to investigate those triggers, because it is our responsibility to recognize any reactions that we have to stimulus. That is our responsibility, with the exception of, say, children or people who are experiencing a mental illness like schizophrenia, as an example, or in the case of extreme emotional or physical abuse. With those as an exception, it is always our responsibility on how we react to any outside stimulus. And I'm not talking about, again, those exceptions. It's more like everyday interactions, right? Somebody cuts us off in traffic, somebody's rude to us at the grocery store, whatever. Somebody calls us rude, somebody calls us stupid, somebody calls us mean. We're triggered by those things. Okay, why am I being triggered? Because there's a part of me that either thinks that's true, or there's a part of me that knows that's true and it's hard to own up to. Like if somebody was to call us rude, there's a part of us that I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be perceived as a rude person. Of course not. Nobody does. But rudeness is a quality that's within us all. We are all capable of that. So when somebody else points it out, it hurts our feelings, because we're like, I'm not rude, you're rude. And it's just two egos yelling at each other. They're both rude. I talk about that in the book. It's like, so often we don't realize that we are a mirror to each other in almost every situation, to look at what needs healing, to dive into greater self-awareness, and thereby evolve our consciousness and evolve our souls. But people don't see it from that perspective. When somebody else is calling you rude, that's because a part of them this is such a interesting conversation. That's because a part of them believes that rudeness is not a quality within them, and it's something they're ashamed of. So when they perceive that it's happening in somebody else, they point it out. But us perceiving somebody calling us rude, it's going to hurt our feelings, because there's a part of us that believes, oh crap, that could be true, and we don't like that part of ourselves. So it's like, we're both rude. You're both rude. And it happens so often. So in my book, I outline some questions that might help you when you're becoming triggered, to help kind of dive into introspection and find out why you're being triggered. So here are some of the questions that may help you. Number 1, is there something in that statement from the other person that I believe to be true, but just may be hard to own up to? Number 2, why am I triggered by this word or this phrase? What was it? Something that happened in my past? For example, being triggered by the word stupid. I was called stupid as a child, probably all of us were, and it was triggering and it hurt our feelings, understandably. So am I being triggered again because it's flashing back to moments from my childhood when, there was trauma around that word being used? Number 3, why did that statement hurt me? Is there a part of me that believes that to be true? As an example, if somebody was to ever say, you're a bad writer, and I'm triggered by that because there is a small part of me that wonders, is that true? That's a normal human reaction. It would be the same thing if somebody said, you're a horrible fill in the blank as to what you do for a living. You're a horrible nurse, you're a horrible attorney, whatever it is. You would be triggered by that because there's probably a small part of you that believes that to be true. So anytime we're triggered, it's really just a denial of that characteristic within us that's triggering us. And when we take a moment to think, okay, well, I am all traits, I have all traits, so does that person, and that person telling me that I have a certain trait is really just a projection within themselves that they haven't accepted that trait and they're projecting that onto me. But just realizing that it's a denial of a characteristic within ourselves. It's so important to understand the root causes of our triggers for personal growth and increased self-awareness. So the next time that you're triggered, you can say to yourself, that's on me. That's on me. Me being triggered, that's on me. And yeah, that person probably shouldn't have said it, but my reaction to that outside stimuli is on me. And that's a really hard piece of this. Yes, it's hard to accept that we are all traits, right? That all traits are within us. That can be really, really hard to accept. But it's also really hard to accept the fact that however we react, again, outside of those exceptions that I mentioned, it's on us. It's on us. Like any outside stimulus, how I react to that is on me. Have I reacted poorly in some situations? Hell yes. Do I regret reacting like that? Hell yes. But again, I've gotten so much better over the years at noticing when I'm triggered and stepping back from that situation and starting to ask myself those questions that we went over. Like, okay, why am I being triggered by this? And can I just release this because I understand my triggers and I understand why they are saying that, because they're also being triggered by something that they're not accepting. So we have the ability to transform our reactions through self-awareness and self-compassion. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. As an announcement, my book was finally published last Friday. The book is called Don't You Effing Dare by Megan Shirey. It's available on Amazon. The Kindle and the paperback versions are available now, but the hardcover and the Audible versions will be available soon, so I'll keep you updated on that. And I'll put a link at the bottom of the episode where you can purchase the book if you'd like to do that. Also, I offer one-on-one coaching sessions. If you're interested in a session with me, please go to my website, meganshirey.com. I'm also a meditation instructor on the Insight Timer app. I teach there every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can join us on the app, or you can join us on my Facebook page, which I stream it live there. And again, it's at the bottom of the episode to click on that. If you enjoy these episodes, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and please leave us a review. We love hearing from you, and it helps us to expand this community. And may you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease, sending you infinite love and light. And until next time.